I originally opened up my own studio because I wanted to help people feel stronger in themselves. I saw how much strength and how fitness really helped me. So I really wanted to create a space where that could be what I'm doing. That could be the goal. That's my focus. And I help guide those people into their strength journey. But it ended up being something so much deeper than that. And I'm about to tell you this whole journey, how it came to life, how it happened, and how I got to where I am today. Welcome to Embody Your Wild. I'm your host, Karolyne LaFortune, and I'm an embodiment guide. I'm a mother of two. I'm a studio owner of EmbodiPole in Ottawa, and I'm here to have real conversations about how to tap into your wildness or erotic power, into your aliveness. Let's fucking go. I'm going to take you all the way back to after I finished high school. At that point in my life, my entire goal was to become a professional musician. I wanted to study music. I wanted to go to Montreal and study at Concordia in the jazz program. And that year, when I went to audition, I fucking nailed the audition, but I ended up failing the theory exam. Womp womp. That career got smashed and it just didn't happen. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe next year I'm going to try again and see. But in that same time, I ended up going to Ottawa U and study in music. So I applied to be in the music program. And funny enough, I didn't get in. They actually accepted me in the Bachelor's of Arts with a music major. And I was going to school, I was going to study music. My mom wanted me to go to university right after school because she felt like I would probably not get back into school if I took a year off. So I ended up listening to her. She paid for my program. This program just drained the shit out of me. So I ended up dropping out before the first semester even ended. So I had to pay my mom back for the whole semester of university. Woo woo! But that's kind of when I was doing my own thing. I was still playing music with some bands. We were, just playing local shows here and there. So after I dropped out of university, that following semester or the following year, anyways, I ended up joining a audio recording academy for a year program. So during that time, instead of performing on stages and whatnot, I really wanted to feel what it would be like to be on the other side of the glass. So that was a really cool learning experience. And during that time, I fell in love with the art of burlesque dancing. I went to see a show and I was blown away. And then I ended up joining that troupe for a little bit until 2011 when I started my own troupe, Bourbon and Spice Burlesque. So that was when my first real business entrepreneurial journey began. So I was organizing all of the shows, I was organizing the routines and managing the people who were in my troupe. I was promoting the shows. All the shows were sold out. A lot of the shows that we've put on in local venues, I was the one who was marketing it, selling it, doing all of the behind the scenes stuff. And after a while, after a few years of running this, I was kind of like, okay, this isn't really lighting me up anymore. This scene isn't really for me anymore. I kind of hung up my garter and retired in burlesque. But it was around that same time that I ended up going back to school in fitness and health, because then my focus shifted more to, I want to help people in the health and wellness aspect. So how can I learn more to be able to do that? So I went and studied in a 2-year program at Algonquin College. And in those 2 years, I also completed my yoga teacher training. So when I was finished school, I was teaching yoga. I was teaching at studios here and there. I was also doing my own thing with running Parliament Hill boot camps. And that's kind of how I started wanting a bigger space, because I was like, okay, I'm going into all of these different studios. I'm also teaching pole at one studio. And then I was teaching pole from home. I'm teaching yoga at this other studio. I was spread out all over the city. And this is kind of what gave me the idea of, you know what, this would be really nice to have my own space and to be able to run group classes in my own space, because when I was teaching pole from home, I just had the one pole. So it was just always one-on-one. And I really love that group, the community aspect of it. This was the birth of Iron X Fitness. And the Iron X is a pole move. So when you're hanging off the pole in the human flag position, that's why I named the studio, because I remember seeing that when I started pole, where there's like, people in higher levels than me, they were doing this move, and I fell in love with that move. And I was like, you know what? One day I'm going to be able to do that move, and that's going to be my goal. I was training for that, and that was my ultimate vision, was to do that move. And so that's why I named the studio Iron X Fitness. And Iron X Fitness started off as pretty much like a jack of all trades fitness space, where we had yoga classes, we had kettlebell, we had WOD, like workout of the day. We had like core classes. I think it was hardcore. We had pole classes. It was all over the place. There was a big mix of different classes that we offered. And as I was running these classes, I noticed that, the pole people aren't doing the fitness workouts classes, and the workout people aren't doing the pole classes. So I basically had two different businesses under one roof. So I was like, okay, well, I need to pick one lane, and I chose to stick with pole. So I got rid of all the fitness classes. I got rid of all the yoga classes, and then we just had pole. And from there was all sorts of different styles of pole, but it was still basics to advanced. And after that time, we started introducing a heels, like an after dark program, because at that point I had an instructor who had come in, and that was her magic. This is what she had brought to the studio. And I remember falling in love with that style of it. I was like, wow, this is so sensual. This is so, like, I feel so much more in my feminine when I'm doing this style of pole. It was a journey as well to pivot to, okay, let's bring more of these classes in, because I'm noticing that I'm like, ooh, I love this style of pole. And they became really popular. It was waitlisted. This was, the pole choreo, the sensual pole, all of the different like floor work and floor play. All of these styles of classes were super popular. And the studio at this point was doing really well. I think this was like 2019. Yeah, 2018, 2019. And it was booming. And then 2020 hit, and we all know what happened there. So, first 2 months of 2020, January, February, were my best months ever. And then in March was like, just kidding. Bye. And so this is kind of what started this other transformation in me. So during the pandemic, we closed for several months. There was the stupid lockdowns that were like, hey, we're open. Hey, we're closed. Hey, we're open. Hey, we're closed. We did that probably 6 times. I don't even know. It was such a blur in that time frame. And we even tried doing the online classes. That just was. I'm not going to say it was good. I'm not going to say it was bad. It just was. Although it gave me lots of, preparation and experience in teaching online, but it wasn't the best thing to have offered. We would have definitely preferred to be open and have in-person classes. And yeah, during that time too, I ended up getting pregnant, because my husband and I figured like, hey, we're supposed to do all these things in 2020, and our plans got kiboshed. So now we're like, let's try for kids. And it happened. And so I was pregnant with my son at the time. And that first trimester, I was so tired. I've never been this tired in my life. This was the time where I think I was sleeping probably almost 18 hours a day. Like I would get up and then I would feel tired. I'm like, okay, I need to go back to bed. Maybe eat something. All right, let's take a nap. And trying to pole dance during that time was really challenging. Like before that in 2018, 2019, like I was a competitive pole dancer. I had won some competitions, and when 2020 hit and I got pregnant, that's kind of where I felt really like that first identity shift. I'm not a pole dancer anymore because I can barely get up and get out of bed. And I remember feeling I had to push myself to do any kind of movement during that time because I was so tired. But then when I started moving, I was like, oh, I feel I have energy again. But that only lasted about half an hour and then I would crash again. This is where I had so many emotions, just a whirlwind of emotions to really feel into like, what is happening with my body? What is happening to me? Who am I? What am I doing? And then as I progressed through the pregnancy, and the pregnancy was actually quite good. I didn't have any complications or anything like that, but it hit me on an emotional level. And at the same time, I was preparing to become a parent. So I'm like, oh my God, how can I avoid doing the same things that I hated that my parents did to me when I was a kid? So it's just a lot of reparenting myself and retraining and undoing some of the conditioning that I was dealing with. And the more I progressed through the pregnancy, the more that I found myself not being able to really pole dance at all. And because the studio was closed too, it was just it's just non-existent. And I remember there was one time we couldn't even drive because there was like, I don't know, I think you'd get charged if you were caught leaving your house or something if it was non-essential travel. So I didn't even want to risk coming to the studio to practice and to really feel into my body because of this whole shit that was happening. And during that time, I felt really alone. I felt very disconnected from myself, but at the same time, I was really excited to be a mom and taking this next step in my journey. And during my second trimester, I had gotten more energy and I felt better. Being able or not being able to pole dance is really what was really hurting at that time. And so during that whole pregnancy, I wasn't really doing much. And I kind of lost my identity throughout this whole process. And even postpartum, I remember I was like, oh my God, yes, this baby's out of me now. I think it was at 7 weeks postpartum. I went to see my pelvic floor physio. She gave me the okay of like, yeah, you're good to return to exercise. I was so tired. I had been up all night with my baby. And even right after that appointment, I went straight to the studio and I was like, oh my God, what can I still do on the pole? When I got here, it was very humbling because that's where I was like, oh, I can't do a lot of stuff that I was able to do. Everything hurts on my skin now, and it's just really hard to get back into it. I was just practicing and I was like, okay, you know what? I just had a baby. I'm going to give myself some grace. I have to be realistic and give myself some compassion. And then a few months went by. I was starting to get back into my old routine. But at that same time, I was working with a life coach. And originally, it's so funny because I hired that life coach to work on communication with staff because I always felt like I wasn't communicating properly. I wasn't like they wouldn't understand my point of view and where I was coming from. And so I would feel like I was always struggling to have conversations with them and to bring stuff up because they weren't really understanding what I was trying to say. So, but during that time, what what came up was just so much more than that, and I was like, "Huh, this is really interesting that I started with her for communication with staff when it turned out to be so much more. It turned out to be just bringing some awareness to how I actually feel and how can I actually create my own style of communication where, I say what's on my heart and whatever happens on the other side and however they interpret it is not really my problem. And that's kind of where I started this understanding of like, oh, there is a separation there. And what I have to say is still important and valid. And how what they have to say is important and valid, but how can we meet each other and understand each other and really work together instead of me saying something, maybe I'm just too direct and offending them, and it's not my responsibility if I'm offending somebody else. Sorry. But that was a big lesson learned there. But what ended up happening was I was discovering some somatic practices through this coaching, and this was still in around 2020. And I started just bringing these into my normal, like, daily lives of like, okay, how can I bring these practices? How can I deal with my emotions? How can I just be in the trenches of motherhood right now where I have a newborn who is not sleeping, I'm not sleeping. How can I take care of myself during those tough times and still run my business? Because A, I didn't have a mat leave, and B, my husband didn't have a parental leave either. He took 3 weeks vacation and he was back to work. So, how could I still take care of myself during that time when it got real, when it got busy, when it just felt like too much and overwhelming? And I felt like I was slowly connecting back to my body. I was coming back into my training, my practices. And then, 18 months later, we had another child because then I was like, you know what? As we're still in the trenches, let's try for another one when my son was 9 months old. And so they are exactly 18 months apart. After this second one, this is when, during the pregnancy again, I was like, okay, this is a good pregnancy. I don't have any complications. And during that time, I really wanted to have an orgasmic birth. So for my first one, we went to the birth center. For my second, I had a home birth. Throughout this whole pregnancy journey, I was really diving into like learning about tantra, learning about orgasmic birth, learning about pleasure, and just really connecting to my body in this way while being pregnant, and learning about different techniques to try and working on like, all right, how can I do some breath work? How can I do some pleasure practices? How can I do even some self-pleasure practices? I found that I was very connected to my body when I was pregnant. However, when I gave birth, it didn't end up being an orgasmic birth, but it was still a pretty good birth. 3 weeks later, I was at the gym. I felt good. I actually felt like I was ready to move. I was ready to get back into my own body. But there was still something missing. Like, I felt like I was still clinging on to that old identity where I can do anything. I can still compete in pole dancing and I can still be how I was pre-babies. And so I was training really hard. And during that time, I had signed up for a pole competition. So at 8 months postpartum, I ended up doing a pole competition. And now that I look back at it, I was like, oh my God, what was I thinking? I even brought my breast pump to the competition because I had to leave for a couple days. And I was just pumping in the back before going on stage. And I just remember like feeling ashamed and feeling embarrassed of doing that because I was the only one there who I guess, just had a baby. And I just felt super disconnected. I just felt super contracted and very just out of my body. And I just remember, sitting there trying to pump, and like some people would pass by me and see me do that and be like, "Wow, you're amazing for doing a competition, and you're still breastfeeding." But in my head, I was like, "Oh, like I'm so embarrassed. I wish I wasn't a mom right now. I wish I wasn't pumping." And there's all these feelings that I just, all of this like disgust over my body and over myself. And then the time came to go on stage to perform my routine. The practice run, I actually did really well. The actual competition itself went okay, and it wasn't my best run, but I'm still happy with the performance and how it turned out. But looking back at it, I would not do that again. This was not something that, yeah, it was just trying to prove to myself that I'm good enough so that I can compete. And it was just pushing my body past its limits, past just everything, and taking time away from my kids as well. And during those times, I still felt like there was something missing. And I came back to those pleasure practices. I came back to these embodiment practices, and I wanted to learn even more and like really get into it. So I ended up doing a certification course for feminine embodiment coaching. And this was a year long, and this gave me so much more, not just information, but just so much more time and presence in my own body, that's when I discovered that, like, oh, I want to bring these practices into my studio. What was interesting was that the energy of Iron X Fitness was very strong, masculine, huh! And the energy of the embodiment of the breath was just very feminine, was just very soft and expansive and opening. So I tried to incorporate some of these concepts to integrate feminine masculine energy, to integrate erotic energy into Iron X Fitness. And that was not that great. Like, the people didn't take it well, and they were just kind of like, what the fuck is this? And why are we doing this now? Why are we doing circle? This is weird. I'm not digging this. And I remember just being like, you know what? I got to do something about this. I need to let's just rebrand. And the rebrand just was an impulsive decision. I remember thinking it was like 1 month. I was like, you know what? I think it was like November or something. It's like, we need to do a rebrand. I'm going to change the whole studio, the name, the colors, everything. By December, I had the name picked out. I had all of the things. And during the holidays, we usually close for 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year's. So during that time, I ended up painting the whole studio. We did the rebrand during that time. So I didn't really get a holiday break that year. But this was, December 2023. And I did it on a whim. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to follow my heart. And it was a really messy transition into EmbodiPole. And that's kind of was like, okay, well, I'm following my heart. There's just something there. There's a little fire that's burning and that's lighting me up. I don't really know what it is yet, but I got to follow that. And there was that desire to bring in more of those practices into pole dancing. And at the time as well, I was like, how am I going to make that happen? Is this even possible? No other studio really does this. And what am I doing? I'm like taking, almost like yoga meditation practices and blending it with pole tricks. And there was a lot of trial and error of figuring out what works, what doesn't. There was like the struggle was real during the rebrand. This was, I think, the time that tested me the most in my entire life was the business rebrand. And this went way beyond like even having children because there was just so much self-doubt. There was so much fear. There was so much shame. So many clients left. So many staff members left. It was a really big 180 flip. And I just remember thinking, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm basically just burning my whole business to the ground and starting from scratch, from 0 clients. Now, granted, I did have some people who stayed. Thank you to those members. But the big majority of them left, and I was dealing with a lot of financial stress, a lot of self-doubt, and a lot of really big intense emotions during that time. And I remember feeling very overwhelmed and just knowing that there is the light at the end of the tunnel, but right now I feel like I'm entering that tunnel. And it's going to take some time to get to that light. I don't know how long it's going to take. We'll see what happens, but I have to follow this fire that's inside of me because that's really my guiding light. After all of this, there's, I got new coaches, I got new members, and then it kind of felt like, oh, okay, I traveled through that tunnel. I've exited that tunnel. Now I'm in all right, the dust is settling phase of my journey and the evolvement of the studio space. But I just remember doing this because I was like, this has been such a big transformation for me that I really want other women and other people to feel this for themselves, because this is not something that can just happen anywhere. We need to be guided into this. We need to be doing these practices on the daily or even on the weekly. That was a challenge. I was also not trusting myself. I was also having a really hard time getting energy and feeling alive in my body because I just felt so exhausted and like I was constantly fighting against the grain and just trying to push and push and push. So mentally, physically, I was just so exhausted. But what kept me going was that connection to my body and that knowing that on the other side of this, there is going to be something so much greater than what it used to be. I can't believe that I went through this big change. This was literally like, it turned my life upside down. I remember like talking to my husband sometimes and he was like, are you sure you still want to do this? And, I flopped from wanting to close the studio to wanting to just become, I don't know, like a doula or something. And I was like, I don't know what else I would do if I wasn't running the studio. But I just knew that I had to keep going. And it even tested me with my lease was coming up for renewal and it was a 5-year lease. And I was like, okay, I need to make a decision that do I close the studio or do I just keep it going? And this was a really tough choice to make because I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what I was doing. I just felt like I was such a big imposter. And then also teaching these concepts where I wasn't super familiar with, maybe at the time, and maybe I wasn't fully embodied in them. And just trusting myself and trusting that inner knowing that I just had to keep going. And so I ended up renewing for 5 years. And now here we are today. It's been, I think, 2 years since that. So, yeah. And then there was a whole other thing with becoming a women-only space where I faced a lot of backlash. And that was also very challenging to navigate. And even having people calling me out on, on social media and just saying a lot of like hateful comments or calling us not a safe space and things like that. So that was another challenge to deal with, but I just feel like the whole thing in the grand scheme of things, like I I am not apologizing for what I did to the studio or to this business because I followed my heart. I followed my gut. I even followed my pussy into this experience. And now it has brought me so much more joy and passion because I actually see that the transformation that these women are having in our space, they're coming in, full of tension, full of tightness. Their bodies are contracted and they leave feeling opened and softened, and they leave feeling more confident. For one person, it gave them the courage to get a divorce because she was no longer happy with her partner. For somebody else, it gave her the courage to leave a job that she hated. And some of these steps are not always easy to take, but the more that you can tap into yourself, into your desires, into your aliveness, this is what this work really does. It helps you get aligned with what you want to do in life, and it helps you to create the life that you want. It helps you to embody your wild. So this studio is such a magical space for me now because I feel like it's a second home. I feel like the sisterhood that has been coming to this space and growing is just so unique and so amazing and welcoming to anybody who's new to this space. So if you've been feeling disconnected to yourself and to your body, this is why I created the studio. I want you to experience the transformation that I've gotten through these practices, and through how pole dancing also helped me, and how pole dancing was my anchor through these big changes. We've got some upcoming events at the studio. So we have a voice and womb workshop on April 18th. I'll put the link in the show notes for more details. And we also have a retreat coming up. So this is the Embody Your Wild Women's Retreat. This is a place where you get to experience this aliveness even deeper than in studio. We are going into a 3-day closed container and ending with a photo shoot so that we can capture all of this beautiful transformation that is happening through this weekend of juiciness, of deliciousness. And so we have 2 women that have already said yes. There are 6 spots left. I'll post the link in the show notes. And if you felt even just a little glimmer in your body as you were listening to this episode, please share this to somebody who really needs to feel this in their bodies as well. So thank you so much for listening. Own your energy, and I'll see you in the next episode.